coach.
He's great.
He was a smart man. He could have went pro. He said, you know how pro is, right? Went through
We're
it.
good, thank you. I'd like to call the Community Preservation
That's right,
Committee
Sal.
meeting of December 18th to order. Our first order of business is a financial update from the town administrator.
Yep. So, happy holidays, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. It's been a little while. We just, Evan Lacasse here is next to me. He's our Deputy CFO and Budget Director. So I finally, for the first time ever, have help on the budget, because I was actually doing a lot of this stuff somehow in my weekend time. So it's great to have Evan here. And one of Evan's tasks eventually will be to get up to speed with all things CPA. In fact, some of the admin expenses we're allowed to legally use towards staff. So we actually did put a small sliver of admin money into the budget model this year when we did the budget adjustments for the schools over the last summer. And so Evan, through the year, is going to be with me working through. We have not had time yet to do the brain dump of Jamie onto Evan of all the stuff. But he did go in and print out just an overall update. It's in the packet, just on where the kind of general money is. I know there was no kind of narrative to go with this, but we have met our 10% requirements on open space, historic preservation, and affordable housing through FY25. Obviously, FY26 will come up at some point, but it is what it is. There hasn't been a lot of activity. The only two things I'd say on projects is the Historical Museum cupola has finally gone out to bid. So those bids are due in early January. We'll probably have a contract late January, February. So we're hoping after the snow goes away that you'll see some scaffolding around the Historical Museum. And then everybody, including myself, we can all go out and take beautiful pictures in front of the Historical Museum with those American flag banners, and it won't look like what happened on the top. I know you all think it. I know you see it. We see it too. But that's why we have community preservation to take projects like that where we wouldn't normally have been able to do it. So hopefully by next summer, that will be complete. And then also the King Street Memorial Park has not even started in terms of the lights. Our hope, maybe prayer, would be that we would be able to get the lights in place for next year. But to be honest with everybody, that is a very tall lift still. Just because our facilities department, who deals with that project, is going to be working probably around the clock for several months with the redistricting stuff. There's a tremendous amount of work to do with the school redistricting work. Not just the move, but also looking at the traffic patterns for Keller Sullivan, fences, walls that have to get moved, paint, just so much stuff. So it's pretty unlikely that that will get done next year, although we'll see how that comes forward. And then lastly, on the other projects, really quick on the community housing, we've put aside, through your support, for the Franklin Ridge money, and I know it's been on our sheet as unspent for like 4 years, but it will finally likely get tapped into, because that project is breaking ground this year, pretty early in the beginning part of this year. Brian Tabiner in our office is going to do an overview of a project update on Franklin Ridge, but the planning board recently, thank you Jay, approved their subdivision permit for the roadway to go up. We've got a $3.5 million MassWorks grant. We've every congressional official I meet, they call me Franklin Ridge now as a nickname, because it's all I've said to Elizabeth Warren, Jake Auchincloss for years. But they delivered with a lot of grant money, and so that project is going to be about halfway financed so far. So we're going to have a good leeway, and the money that's on here that hasn't been spent yet will be contributed towards that project as construction goes on. Obviously the roadway, the sewer work, the utilities, all of that's going to be the part of the first part of this year. So that's been like 10 years in the making. So finally we're we're having a shovel go in the ground this spring and this summer for the Franklin Ridge 60 units of senior affordable housing. So that, if we have the folks upstairs on our side, by the end of the decade, that project might get a ribbon cutting, which would be huge for the town for a lot of reasons. So those are the quick project updates. Happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
Does anyone have any questions?
Did we do anything about the film, like down at Camp Hyacinth, or,
It was the Rod and Gun Club.
Rod and Gun Club,
We didn't, I never got anything back in return from that meeting. I do think they found another funding source, either earlier on, or there was a donation made or something of that sort, so,
Because we asked for information, and they never followed up.
Correct.
they never followed up.
No, I think they came up with the money themselves.
Yeah.
That's what I was told.
Yeah, I had a question.
Hang on,
Oh,
one
I'm
second.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you're all set, Jake?
My bad.
Yep, okay, no, go ahead, Dwayne.
Yeah, no, I just had a question, concern regarding the old Franklin High School. I'm not sure what the plan is for the building, okay? But I certainly would like to see it preserved. I think it is a historical building. And I'm just wondering, what can our committee do if that's the route? I've heard talk it's a possible police station. Well, that certainly makes sense to me. But what about if that's not the case? I would not want to see it sold, or, you know, or used for something. I think the town should retain possession of it and ownership. And if that's the case, our committee, could we handle that situation and preserve that building?
Just so everyone's clear, Wayne's talked about the Davis Thayer School.
Yes, I'm
Right,
sorry.
yeah.
My old high school.
Wayne went to high school.
My high school.
Right,
Yes.
right.
It's like the Depot Plaza JJ Newberry building.
Right.
Different generations have a different name, and I'm
Yes.
learned them over the years.
This is
So-
more significant than
Right.
JJ and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So depending on who I'm talking to, I try to lay out
Yeah.
what they, yeah, so, we just hired, the police station building committee just hired, the architect. And that, there'll be a public engagement piece on the police station project, probably late winter, spring. There'll be a website, there'll be some open houses at the current police station. We hired Castle Booze and Associates, who some of you know. They've worked in town for years, they've done great work. They gave us an unbelievable price for the architect design of the police station. And why? Because we've already paid them a lot of money to do the studies on the old high school Davis Thayer building. And so they've been inside and out of that building more times than anybody else. They're gonna consider it a site because part of the early part of, probably in the middle of 2025, they'll get down to evaluating sites for the new police station in town. You know, as I've said before, I don't mean to put the cart before the horse in trying to prescribe that the site might be the former Parmenter School. But the reality is, financially is, if it's not a parcel that the town already owns, we're then gonna have to buy something. And we all know the financial stat of the town. And once, by the way, I know this may seem crazy, but once private landowners are aware that the public is interested in land, the price goes down. Just kidding. Usually the price goes up, and in typical Franklin fashion, it goes way up. So we have to be careful as a community. There are some issues likely at the Parmenter site. There is some water. There's a natural spring underground that we're gonna have to work with. And the old high school Davis Thayer building has a lot of restrictions on that site for a police station as well. The biggest piece is the size of the parcel is not the size of the parcel that's likely needed. Probably gonna need 4 to 5 acres, closer to 5, if we're gonna make it. The committee's talked about having an inviting space, right? Not just a station with walls, but something with outdoor space, a community space inside, and some other training areas and things like that. And you got a growing community with call volume going like this, the needs assessment will determine what the size of the building are they're needed. But Castle Booze has already been through that building. And the truth of the matter is if it's going to be a police station on the old high school Davis Thayer site, it is far more likely than not that the building would have to be destroyed. There's no way that you can spend the kind of money we're talking about, given the current status of cost of living in Massachusetts, to go out and do 20, 30 million renovations to that building of a historic nature. And so I know that there's definitely different community feelings about whether the building would even want to be torn down or not. And as you know, the Davis Thayer Reuse Committee had a whole process. There was a report that was published. It's on the Davis Thayer Committee website. And it was the priority of the committee to try to not knock down the building yet. They wanted to continue to own the land. And ultimately, they wanted us to put out an RFP for a mixed-use facility, where somewhere on the first floor, there could be some sort of maker space or art space or business space, and then try to renovate the top couple floors for some level of housing. We did a request. It wasn't a binding request for proposals, Wayne, but we did do kind of a solicitation for bids of like what would be interested out there. And a few firms did publish some proposals. They're again on the Davis Thayer Reuse website. You know, old school buildings like this typically go this way. Communities say, well, we don't want to knock it down. There's a nostalgia to it. The land is is obviously in a prime real estate location. The zoning, by the way, is single family 4, which is the worst zoning for that site. But the zoning goes back 100 and something years because nobody changed the zoning because it was always a school. So all the zoning around downtown is altered over the years, but they never changed Davis Thayer, so it's still a single family 4 site. So you can't actually by right build a lot of housing on that site. So you'd have to change the zoning at some point too. I think the police station committee is gonna do its diligence just to check and make sure that that site is not a good site. They'll present recommendations. If they do think it will fit a police station, they'll also recommend to knock down the building. Unfortunately, the building is a money pit. And it's beautiful on the exterior. On the interior, there's a lot of memories. But really, when you lift up the hood, you know, it's completely out of code. There's no elevator. There's no ADA accessibility. As a public facility, you could just go down the lines and realize that's tens and tens of millions of dollars. You know, it's certainly feasible to go to the taxpayers and say, well, you know, we need $40 million for the police station to renovate, or $50 million and do this, but, you know, that's a decision that's gonna be very hard, I think, for the community to make. And so if the police station building committee deems that not a site that they wanna look at, then we would revert back to the RFP priority from the town council. And then that is, I will say, a very, very complicated request for proposals. Something that's gonna be very well thought through. There'll probably be a lot of community engagement on some of it.
Did people actually make proposals?
There were 3 entities on the non-binding RFP, just to get a sense of like people's imaginations. And there was 3 different proposals. I mean, there was All Housing, Pembroke Construction, who people may be familiar with. They're a pretty big name in Massachusetts. They do a lot of renovation work. In fact, I was at a press conference with the governor when we got our Franklin Ridge money, and it was in Jamaica Plain, and that company was converting an old church in JP to Artist Lofts in Jamaica Plain, which was a very cool project. So that company has a lot of potential. There was also somebody that proposed an art center. There were some local residents that threw their hat in the ring. Dean College and Caniford Properties kind of put in a concept. There was no actual bids. There was nothing binding. It was just conceptual. So firms probably spent, you know, a few $1,000s of their own in-house to just kind of give some ideas. And other than Pembroke, the other 2 entities were local firms. So, you know, I think for them, honestly, it was probably just having a lot of fun thinking of what could be. But there was nothing monetary attached to that. Not only was there nothing binding, those bids were not required to put in a financial plan. So you could have a lot of fun with when you don't have to do the dollars and cents, right? But once they look under the hood again and they really say, am I gonna put my capital and credit line and everything out there and go to the bank for loans, that's a different conversation.
To me,
Yeah.
thinking, if somebody's gonna come in and do mixed use on the first floor in housing that we want on the second and third floor, you're almost gonna have to give them the property in order
You
for
would.
them to do that.
You would.
You wouldn't get
Yeah.
any significant dollars.
It's like the Old South Church.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, as a small tangent, I finally do have all the signatures for the Old South Church, so that deed will be recorded probably in the next couple of months at the registry, and Habitat is planning to put a shovel in the ground on that project this summer. So just as a sidebar to that, there's a little bit of a tangent, but
Yeah, just a few things that I've been thinking about. With Davis Thayer, I'd hate to see it knocked down. However, if it was gonna save a lot of money to put a police station there, I could see the rationale. Knowing a little bit about other towns and locations of police departments, I noticed most of them are located in central locations. David Sayer, to me, is an ideal location for a police station. Palmerton School is a terrible location. I mean, you're gonna be speeding down Wachusett Street, speeding down King Street, as opposed to being located in the center of town. You have traffic lights you can shut down and control and all that stuff. But to me, location, location, location for a police station. I think it's absurd. I think Palmyra is a terrible location. And I don't know. I don't know who's gonna, when the final vote's gonna be. Is it gonna be a vote by the people or what it is? I just think it's terrible and not feasible. That's my opinion.
So I would say, and I understand those concerns. First of all, police cruisers don't sit at the police station. They're actually throughout the community. So there is no speeding down King Street or Wachusett Street. The fire station y'all built 15, 20 years ago was supposed to be where the senior center is, and abutters were not happy. I think everybody knows this. So the police station right next to Dean College and Union Street is not gonna probably be advantageous for people, and those folks are probably not gonna be happy for many of the same issues that we just brought up. But it's very different than fire stations. Fire stations have the bay, the sirens go off, and you do get a lot of noise. But police stations actually are quiet. So if you live next to a police station, it's far quieter than a fire station. There is no speeding down the road because the police aren't on, they don't come in and out like a fire truck. They're actually spread throughout the entire community, so you actually never hear the police cruisers. The second piece is, with so much call volume off 495 and all that, there's probably gonna be a discussion at some point we'll look at too at the police station about whether or not you have two stations and you have one smaller one as a headquarters and a satellite station up by where the current facility is. The current facility has to have some use, and why? Because really the high school and Horace Mann complex is really the heart and soul of the town. And we have fireworks, we have festivities every single day. I know the high school complex is packed up. Our police have done all of the security measures based around large-scale events at the high school for the football games, for all the athletic events, and all the other programs that are up there. So in terms of a central place where you're getting the best bang for your buck, in terms of where there's gonna be the largest congregations of people, it's probably gonna be the common to the high school area. So we're probably gonna wanna still have some presence at the current site, but also you've got a lot of call volume based off of King Street where that response time is actually a lot lower. The consultants as part of the, what we call the program, the consultants will look at all of the data, all of the trends throughout the whole community, where that call volume is, and also where those trends will likely be based on development, based on available land for development, where future housing will go, where dense housing will go, et cetera. They'll look at all those trends because we're not building a police station for 10 years. You're going to build it for 50, and you want to make sure you try to locate, that type of thing in different areas of town. So we know that nobody's going to be happy with it being located wherever they're at because it's just the nature of the beast. There's NIMBYism too when it comes to civic projects as well. There's NIMBYs with schools. Like it's NIMBYism is our brand in Massachusetts. And I think that once the architects lay out all the data, what exactly we need it for, what it is, that's why we do a site analysis, Wayne. And there may be other sites that the town may have to look at to purchase to make those response times and those.
But are you suggesting substations?
Could. I don't know. I'm not the one that's going to do the work. That's why by law, we have to have an owner's project manager, OPM, and an architect to do this. I'm not an expert. I'm not an engineer like Jay and many others. And Jay, you want to know? But
We need an architect for this one.
right. But I mean, this is a fairly specialized thing. I mean, Castle Booz and several other firms. This is all they do is schools and/or public safety facilities. We'll be doing tours of 4 or 5 other buildings to get that contextual, probably Shrewsbury, Needham, and some others based on comparables. And that'll all be, Wayne, that'll all start probably in the spring, and then really that piece of the project will be all throughout next calendar year. I highly doubt there'll be a ballot vote on the location. There'll definitely, almost certainly be a ballot vote on a debt exclusion for the actual financing of it, and I can't prescribe when that would be by now. Yep.
Yeah, just, I just looking around at other towns and cities, like you look at, say, Millis, for example, their police station's right in the main drag. Attleboro, same thing. You just go on and on. I just think Palmetto, that area there is totally out of sync for where a police station should be located. And to me, it just totally doesn't make any sense. It's just a bad location. No one can convince me otherwise. I mean,
That's
it's just ridiculous. We have the old high school Davis Thayer. That to me is a perfect location for a police station.
What if it doesn't fit?
They can make it fit.
Well, Needham made it fit.
They can
And they
make
had
it
to buy,
fit.
well, Needham had to buy up 5, 6, 7, 8 properties. They spent 10, 15 million or whatever it is to buy up houses so they could cram it in. We'd have to take land from Dean College to maybe do it. I don't think that's gonna go over well. You gotta look at the size of the parcel. The parcel's not that big.
It's
The
bigger
building
than-
itself is
It's
actually.
bigger than the
very-
one they're on now.
What's that?
It's bigger than
Well,
the one they're on
and the
now.
one, and there isn't anybody in town that would say that that was well placed. By the way, the current one, they put it on school property. The school department actually owns that piece of land. So when they built that, there was a lot of things missed. It also was built on a site that was free, and they also built it on a site where they built it in wetlands. If you were to build that today, Mr. Livingstone over here and Mr. Mello, and this is not a critique, they would have significant issues. I don't even know if that building today would be permittable. I don't believe it would be. I know you guys have probably looked at it before. Thank you, Jay. Yeah. I don't-
Ultimately, it turns out it's a good location because of the reasons you said you might want it as a satellite.
Satellite facility. There's already infrastructure there. There's already a
Right.
tower. And with the quantity of attention that's at the school up the street, and also the location on 140 to 117 onto 495, where, there's obviously a significant amount of accidents.
But it is a
and
residential area. That's a residential area,
Where,
Palmetto.
Palmetto, right.
Yep.
We
Well,
need to
so-
see what the consultants come
That's
back
all.
with.
Right, exactly.
And I'm also just trying to make sure we can afford it, so we don't have to buy another 10 or 15 million dollars worth of property, which would, quite frankly, postpone the project probably quite significantly for a long time.
And we as a board can't help out with that in
Right.
any way,
No.
Exactly.
unless it's some preservation of Davis Thayer,
That's right.
which from the sounds of it, that's not really a good option.
Well, I think the thing with Davis Thayer is just as I said before, it's kind of a money pit. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just the cost to renovate that building. And, I give Mike D'Angelo a tremendous amount of credit, to maintain it, to keep it in the status it is. If you looked at other comparable schools 100 years ago in Hopkinton or many other communities that have old schools, they're not in anywhere near as good a shape, at least from a vanity perspective, from the road. When you look at it from the road, the average passerby doesn't think there's anything wrong. I mean, it's a beautiful building on the exterior, and I think most public commentary has been around the front facade. There was some comments at the Davis Thayer Reuse Committee of why don't we just knock off the back side of it and just keep the front half? Well, that's a pretty expensive proposition too. And so there's just gonna be a lot. But I will say, Wayne, to answer your direct question, if the Community Preservation Committee wanted to spend money on the protection of the facade of the building, they could. So from a historic preservation perspective,
Yeah.
like the Old South Church, we contributed $100,000 to the exterior preservation restriction on that building because the community, this committee, and the council wanted that facade for the streetscape. You could still spend money on that. That's gonna be a very expensive endeavor.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So on this list you have here, the beginning balance, this is what our liabilities were, correct?
What page? The first page?
On the, well, we have the, it's actually the last page.
Yep.
So this is all our liabilities, the 4.5 million, right?
That's right. That's the total we've collected in CPA history.
That's everything we've
I
collected?
believe so, yep.
Everything we've collected and.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, you're right, that's the expenditures, sorry. Yep,
Right.
the beginning balance, yep.
It's, so that, and so the 4.1 is our outstanding liability at this point.
I believe so. Yep. Because we have not, yeah, that's
Right,
correct.
So that includes anything that we would owe still on Schmidt Farm?
Correct.
Maple Street, all that?
Well, with the debt service payments,
Yes.
that's right. Yep.
So, one thing I would like to see if you can do it for us, and obviously not now, but to see as far as the balance that we have and how that is allocated, because we've put money aside when we haven't been able to spend it to meet the 10%.
That's correct.
Right, so if we could see that, that would be helpful.
So we've allocated the 10% for the years that we've been in CPA. We'd have to do that again in FY '26. I
Yeah.
will say there's no pending projects. You know, I know the King Street Memorial Park will have several phases to it. But outside of that, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. We did not use Community Preservation Act money for the SNET Trail purchase, which got filed this week with the federal government, by the way. And so you do have a little bit of money you do have a little room. I will say that saving money also isn't bad. There will be a day that will come where something will come out of the middle of nowhere, and you know me with interest. I mean, and the Fed today said they're not they're not into a lot of rate decreases, which could change. But I'm just looking out the next year. It doesn't look like interest rates are going to get far better immediately. So you want to be careful and have some cash down payment if some other major project came up, including even the Davis Thayer issue, right? Or another piece of open space or another historical preservation purchase or project or something like that. So we have met, and we did have Evan check this earlier, we have met the 10% requirements through FY '25.
Either by spending or reserving,
By
right?
spending or reserving, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yep.
So,
We do have a lot of reservations, you're right.
Yeah.
With the housing especially.
so this, on the second page you have here, this $606,000, that's not what we have as a balance, is it?
No, so that's what we collected in excess of what we projected for CPA funds. So that beginning balance, the 1.7,
Yep.
that's what the projected budget was. Year-to-date collected is what we collected so far in the year. And then the ending balance is how much we exceeded that original projection by.
Wouldn't that be what we were under it by?
Yeah, you got 1.566 was the beginning balance, the year-to-date collected is 805, and you have an ending balance of 760, so that's what we anticipate through the rest of the year,
Right.
right? And then you've got the match, I think is what the state, is that what the state revenue CPA is, 125 on the next line?
So the next line, yeah, so
You mean the
Anticipated.
156?
156 is
Yeah.
what we budgeted.
Yep,
correct, we took in 282 to date. So we
Okay.
exceeded by 125,000.
okay. So the 760 is just a factor of there's still 2 periods we need to collect from in this fiscal year.
Correct.
Okay.
But if you, I think what Evan's saying is, if all that, assuming all that comes in and people pay their taxes,
Mhm.
which, we have a very high tax collection rate in Franklin, extremely high, but some people still don't pay their taxes. When all that comes in, what he's saying, I think, is by the end of the year, it's projected to have a surplus over 606.
Right.
By the end of the fiscal year.
A surplus?
Over what we
No.
budgeted.
No, if you do it, it should match that number, right? The 1.7. Because the big number there's the 760.
Right.
Which you should collect in the next two
Two
tax
fif- yeah,
payments.
That's right.
Right, so all this is, this has nothing to do with the actual balance of what's in the account. This is just based on what was gonna be collected in this fiscal year.
That's
As
correct.
of right now.
As
no.
of right now, yeah.
As, right.
In
right,
addition to the additional state match money.
Right,
So
Right.
we will have a number that will be higher than what we budgeted.
by the 125, roughly.
Right.
Right.
Okay, great.
Right.
So, at some point, and maybe you can just email it to the committee,
Yeah.
what the actual, where money's reserved, what the actual balance is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Does anyone else have
Balances in just the 10%, or just in the
Everything.
budgeted reserve?
everything? Yeah. Yeah, they would show what was budgeted as in a reserve and what's, not reserved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone else?
And what we have.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, that's important. Thank you.
Yep.
Jane, Chris?
Yes.
So, quick question, if you look at that second page on that report, it does break out second page.
Yeah, we're
Each
just-
category, the historical preservation, community housing, your open space, each one of those has
What's been
kinda like
appropriated.
but it
Yeah.
also has its bucket, like the very first line, there's 261,000, that's part of that 10%
Mhm.
that they can spend towards
Right.
historical, that's not awarded or appropriated for something. So each one of them has its own appropriation already.
So the
But
set,
if we wanna, if we could maybe,
Right, but it doesn't show us what the actual balance is, right? We don't have,
that is the balance,
so we have $4.5 million in the account.
yes.
did
okay?
we spend
But
70?
some of it within each category is already set aside for like Smith Farm, some is allocated and some is not yet.
So if the 4.5 in the first column was the balance at the beginning, and then you're saying our current balance is, in the account, is 4,125,000?
Yes.
Okay.
And most of it,
Okay.
if you see, is in budgeted reserve, like almost
Right.
2 million of that.
Yep.
Right. Which makes sense, because we've had a couple of years where we didn't spend a lot of money.
Right, so the historical preservation is the one where we've actually allocated money and not spent it.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Correct.
Does anyone have a question after that?
So did we spend 70,000 and 100,000 in that, in historical preservation? Is that what that's showing?
You've appropriated it.
So we haven't,
You haven't spent it. You would end up getting like year-to-date expense, or if it was an
Okay.
encumbrance, they would go in those categories.
so further
So
down.
when
that's-
they break ground, so both of those projects, funny enough, should break ground this summer, right? So the cupola, we just said the bids are out, the church. So I would anticipate when we come back, say a year from now, just, those invoices will come in. They'll get on the year-to-date expense, and then you'll see those draw down. If you go down a little further, that you can see that on the open space number.
Yep, okay. So Maple Hill Land INT, that we appropriate 110,000, we've spent 55? Is that what that's showing?
On interest.
Yep.
Yep.
INT's interest.
Interest, but we
Yep.
spent, so we literally spent 55 out of the 110.
Then you have the principal down below.
Yep.
And then you'd have other expenditures year to year. We're gonna be doing that principal and, interest each year from now on out.
Right, but that interest basically, again, is for half the year,
Yes, if you do the math.
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
That's correct.
Anyone else?
So, right, to Mike's point, like, or Chris, if you, by the end of the year, that'll be all 110,318, and that'll show a full year payment on it.
Right, yeah. Yep.
Good example.
All right, anyone else?
And you can see and you look down at King Street Memorial Park, for example, they appropriated 500,000 this year. Mike has already spent 5250 of that to have the, engineers come out and try to figure out where exactly they're gonna put in the electrical conduit lines, for the, stadium lights. For example.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
Yep.
Does anybody have a comment or anything additional?
And this is just for FY '25, correct?
Yep.
So this is not cumulative of the 4 years of CPA,
Correct.
right? Okay.
Yep.
That's fine.
Do we want to talk about when we want to meet next?
It's really a public hearing in January or February.
Okay.
Would really be the next meeting.
Does anybody have a preference? Does this time work for people?
Yeah.
Yeah. So can we do that, like, would it be February 6th or the 13th?
So February 5th is a Wednesday. You could do it 5 o'clock again on the 5th.
Would that work for people?
As of right now,
Is that good for you, Jay? You able to-
As of now.
They don't tell me until 10 days ahead of time. So it's.
I just know you work, I know everybody work, or.
I mean, it is.
Yeah, everybody-
Is this-
Some of you are retired,
Would
but.
later be
but-
better?
I know.
5 o'clock gets me home earlier, so I don't really mind.
Okay, so it really does work for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I have subcommittee meetings one Wednesday a month, and but I don't know until like 2 weeks out.
Or it still depends on the date?
Yeah, so it depends on the day.
So
As of now,
February.
it work.
Okay.
Because this, I think we have to do a legal ad for the hearing, if
Yeah.
I remember correctly, so I
Yep.
just wanna.
Yeah.
Anything else, Jamie?
No, just, don't have any projects before us. You're probably not gonna get any project proposals at the hearing from the town. There's just no the money is one thing, the bandwidth is another. I know there's a couple of playgrounds that have to get, redone for the redistricting because of the change in age groups at different schools. If those playgrounds are available to the public 24 hours a day, outside of school hours, obviously, we may, the superintendent may come and ask for an appropriation in the next couple of years for those. But our focus is trying to get the backlog of all these other projects done. And trying to do these and get this backlog done before I start throwing more on Mike and Kevin's plate in the future. So, small projects we could do, so if anybody else that, we'll obviously do a legal ad, we'll do some promotion for the hearing, the date, and if people have ideas, they can certainly bring them forward, but, I think some of those smaller projects that may empower others to do some of the work may be key, but there's not gonna be a lot of extra time in Mike and Kevin's, work plan to get stuff done, so,
Perfect.
all right?
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Hope everyone has a happy holiday.
You too.
You too, thank you.
Is there a motion?
When's the next meeting?
February 5th, tentatively.
At 5 o'clock,
Thank you,
5 o'clock, Wayne.
thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
You know, it's funny.